All right, guys, we're back. I'm going to go ahead and start this movie over. Cannabis vs. Climate Change, Paul J. von Hartmann. It is not going to be streamed through our spatial, but you will get to enjoy the movie itself and get a bunch of education along the way. So it's only 1 hour long. Much loved. Enjoy.
This program is more than just a television show or a movie. It's an appeal to the court of public opinion to overrule a dysfunctional justice system. In the next few minutes, you'll learn about the true value of the cannabis plant and why it's so important that we reverse our opinion of it based on a need so great that everything that we cherish may be at stake. Sacrifices made by past generations, great sacrifices, need to be reclaimed so that our generation and future generations have the freedom to farm, which is critical to our sovereignty, to our health, and to the well-being of this planet. I hope you'll join with me in putting a stop to prohibition of cannabis and intensifying our cultivation of it with the intention of producing abundance of food and fuel and all of the things that we need in order to survive. And at the same time, healing the planet of global warming and intensifying UVB radiation, the global broiling.
as conditions of environment, economics, and global military conflict deteriorate, it becomes more important than ever for people to understand relationships between cannabis agriculture, energy production, food security, and developing sustainable economics as a means of achieving world peace.
We have what we need if we use it. But if we continue down the road of prohibition, our society will continue to degenerate. And balance with this planet, with the natural order that governs this planet truly, will never be achieved by our species. Cannabis is not optional, it's essential.
My name is J von Hartmann. I'm an international cannabis scholar and filmmaker. My particular focus is cannabis versus climate change. I'm about to finish a book and a digital video documentary by the same title. Cannabis versus climate change addresses the ecological significance of cannabis in reality. There's the political reality that we're being forced to endure, and there's the reality that is going to decide our sustainable existence and peace on Earth or our extinction, and a violent one at that. The good news is that it doesn't have to happen. We do have alternatives that aren't being responsibly addressed. What it comes down to is that cannabis is essential. It's not illegal. It's a polar shift in values that needs to happen based on the realization of the true value of cannabis. There are three things in particular that make cannabis both unique and essential. First of all, complete nutrition. Cannabis is the only common seed with 3 essential fatty acids in proper proportion for long-term consumption. It's the best available source of organic vegetable protein on Earth. And there are many components within the whole cannabis plant when eaten raw that affect our health in a beneficial way. The best medicine is the one that keeps you from getting sick in the first place. And drugs don't make seeds. Herbs make seeds. On the first page of the Bible, God was quoted twice as telling us we need the herbs. And there's no court on earth that has rightful jurisdiction over any herb-bearing seed. As soon as we concede that, then we give up rightful jurisdiction of every herb-bearing seed. And I'm not willing to do that. And future generations are going to wonder what the hell we were thinking, continuing to burn petrochemicals and coal when we know that increasing UVB radiation has more than doubled in the last 20 years, and it's increasing the solubility of mercury, arsenic, and selenium compounds out of solution in the environment, the air, the water, the soil. We don't know what level of genetic mutation UVB radiation is capable of in changing the viability of heirloom seeds. All of the indicator species are dying. The birds, the bees, the bats, the coral reefs, the phytoplankton. 40% of the phytoplankton are gone. 50% of the boreal forests that used to produce the atmospheric aerosols called monoterpenes that shield the planet from the sun are gone. They're not going to come back under the present conditions. If we don't grow cannabis as fast as we can in every soil and climate condition that it may be able to adapt and expand the arable base, sequester 12 tons of carbon per acre growing cannabis organically, 9 tons for the cannabis itself, 3 tons for the organic soil, then we are going to achieve extinction in this century. And it will be a violent extinction, and I refuse to allow future generations to suffer our inability to coordinate our thinking and to use the electronic communication abilities that we have for the first time in the history of our species to determine our social evolution. We have what we need. The ball is in our court. President Obama signed Executive Order 13603 on March 16, 2012, that identifies cannabis as a strategic food resource available by essential civilian demand. You can't have a strategic herb-bearing seed that's also a Schedule I drug. Drugs don't make seeds, herbs make seeds. You can make a drug from an herb, but you can't make an herb from a drug. They're not the same thing. Drugs are dead. Seeds are life itself. We depend on them for our lives. And if we concede rightful jurisdiction, then our children and future generations will suffer for our spineless concession. I have a responsibility as a father, and I call to all fathers everywhere, to grow hemp, expand the arable base, throw up a monoterpene sunscreen against the UVB that's increasing the solubility of mercury. If you Google global broiling, it'll take you to my writing, because nobody else is writing about this. I hope you look for my book entitled Cannabis versus Climate Change. It summarizes an achievable strategy, an affordable strategy, a time-efficient strategy for effecting meaningful change. Because it's not about the legitimate debate anymore. The debate is over. Cannabis versus climate change is the final argument. If we don't fix climate change, it won't matter what we do fix. And it's happening right now. It's not just the ozone layer, it's the monoterpene concentrations. They reflect the solar UVB radiation away from the planet like little liquid crystals. They refract sunlight. They also create clouds that further protect the surface of the planet and create rain. It's actually a monoterpene enhanced rain because the nuclei of the water droplets in the rain bring the monoterpenes back to Earth. Well, the anti-carcinogenic, antifungal, antioxidizing, antiviral, antibiotic properties of monoterpenes are well documented. So we can logically assume that atmospheric monoterpenes also play a very, very significant role in the purification of the hydrologic cycle. And if we have half the monoterpenes in the atmosphere that we used to have, then we are exposed to at least twice the UVB radiation, actually more because of the depletion of the ozone layer. But it's a larger argument than anything else that's being talked about here. Because even if we figure out how to regulate and do all these things that people are talking about doing with cannabis, we're going to burden an industry that can save our lives. And why would we do that? Why would we regulate something or limit something that we really should just be planting as fast as we can and praying it's not too late? Cannabis is essential. It's not illegal. It can't possibly be illegal because it's too valuable. Essential means we need it. So if you need it, more of it is better than less of it. It's all very logical. It doesn't take a lot of attorneys. It doesn't take a court decision. We can look at the historical record. We can take a look at contemporary science, the gold standard science that is being replicated all over the world, and we can come to a conclusion in record time, because right now the seeds from the feral hemp in the Midwest are ripening. And they're dropping onto the ground. And if we don't harvest those seeds, we're missing an enormous once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Because any plants that survived last year's drought in the Midwest to produce viable seeds this year have been hardened off to conditions that we can expect to get worse in the future. And those properties are valuable not only for national security in this country, but global integrity. And those characteristics need to be replicated. Those extremely valuable properties need to be recognized before they go to waste. And we don't have anything to plant in the spring. So the urgency of this is perhaps the most important message. It needs to happen sooner than anybody can possibly wrap their head around. This needs to happen yesterday. Everything we need to transcend prohibition. We don't need to end it or change it. We need to transcend it because it was never viable to begin with. And the fact that the environmental conditions and the social conditions and the economic conditions that we depend on for our existence are so deteriorating and so damaged that if we don't recognize what can help us, what can heal us, and initiate that healing process, then shame on us, because time is the only thing you can't make more of. Time is the limiting factor in the equation of survival. And I've talked face to face with the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. I've talked face to face with his chief advisor, Robert Bonney. I've communicated with everyone in the drug policy reform establishment, the oxymoron that is disempowering the grassroots and funneling off support to the endless conversation and the strategizing and the meetings at the Playboy Club and the disingenuous dimensions of the contemporary cannabis culture. People need to snap out of it. We need to change this. We need to change it now. And to wait around for it to happen or to any further discussion is not necessary. It just isn't, and it's counterproductive, like prohibition itself. People call prohibition a failure. It's not a failure. It's counterproductive to its own stated objectives. Every problem that anybody's ever had with cannabis has happened in the context of a drug war. If Roger Christie can be in federal prison for 3 years, then anybody can be in federal prison for 3 years. Roger Christie is one of the most heartful, helpful, intelligent people on the planet. I've known him for 22 years. He and I planted cannabis publicly in 1992 under the banyan tree in Lahaina and demanded to be arrested, which formally challenged the state attorney general. I did the same thing a year later on the steps of the state capitol in Sacramento in 1993 with the Green Party. I planted cannabis publicly, challenging the rightful jurisdiction of any court over any herb-bearing seed, because our freedom to farm every herb-bearing seed is the first test of religious freedom. I'll say it again, our freedom to farm every herb-bearing seed is the first test of religious freedom. I'm not asking for permission. I'm exercising essential civilian demand according to Executive Order 13603 and 6 other presidential executive orders identifying cannabis as a strategic resource that's available by essential civilian demand. Thank you very much. I appreciate you listening to me.
But I need your help in exercising essential civilian demand for a strategic food resource, without which optimum health and world peace are just not possible.
This is December 31st, 1991, and we're just reflecting on the last day of perceived illegal status for the hemp plant. Tomorrow at high noon, we're going to be planting the first legal cannabis in the United States. We're doing it in order to save the earth, primarily, in order to make earth-compatible fuels, food, medicines, cloth, paper, building materials, 50,000 different products with which to show our respect for the natural order and assert our rights as individuals in a free country, in a free world, so that other people can take our example and embrace it as their own. People who now are afraid to do this because they think they don't have the power. We know that they do, because we know that we do, because we're rational, we're informed, and we care, not only about other people, but other creatures. In fact, the creature that gives us our life, the earth, of which we are a part, and yet for some time now, we've played kind of a dark role, not taking responsibility for what we do, not taking responsibility for what we know as a society. And we're just going to change that tomorrow. It's very simple. It's the foundation of peace, and it's what everyone wants. So, with my friends and with people all over the world who know what needs to be done, we are stepping out in this crossroads of the world and making it right from a place of love and a place of truth and a place of peace.
Beautiful testimony. It's an absolute privilege and an honor to be on the front porch in this truly beautiful place at the last day of the year, a beautiful celebration that we're joining in tomorrow for the beginning of a new year, the dawning of a new era, and that's the elimination of fear surrounding the use, cultivation, and the expectation, really, of the hemp plant as nature's finest plant gift to the human race. Tomorrow's the day at high noon. Paul calls the event, and I'm more than happy to share in it. And a phrase that a good friend of mine, Lawrence McKinney, uses often is that it's time to rise and stand for our beliefs and speak our truth in the light and let the consequences fall where they may. We think that we're empowered. We know that we're empowered as divine, spiritual, sovereign beings who have every right to have the best nutrition, the best medicines, the organic foods, and terrific building products, safe and sure medicine to heal people on the planet. At the time of healing. And what better way to start the new year out than to put a beautiful seed in the ground that can benefit the whole cycle of life. I want to thank Paul for the invitation. And it's truly God expressing itself at this time without fear and without arms, without firing a shot. Great masses, great numbers of people's lives can be changed for the better with no violence at all. And that's a beautiful thing to be a part of. I'm stoked to be part of
People that have suffered, people that have sacrificed, people that have died for our freedom are with us today, wondering if the freedoms that they suffered for and died for are going to be preserved in this country. Because that's what they died for. That's what they suffered for. And the children that haven't been born yet, and the dolphins that haven't been born yet, and the whales that are on their way to Hawaii right now to be born this winter, depend on us to make the right choice. And we've made it. And the seed that I planted will grow by God's grace. Some people say God doesn't make mistakes. And I believe that. And if you want to call that a religious belief, then you can add the atrocity of interfering with religious freedom to the list of crimes. The first legal hemp first legal cannabis is going to be planted underneath this tree today. On behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves, on behalf of those who haven't been born yet, who are with us today, hoping that we do the right thing, hoping that people understand.
This was written just in the last few weeks. We just received it 2 days ago. It's a fax from Dr. R. Lee Hamilton, Roberta Hamilton, medical researcher and biochemist at UCLA, and William Eidelman, MD, also a medical researcher at UCLA. Quote, "It is no longer a matter of ignorance versus politics. There is no time left to argue. We have reached a turning point and we must intervene now if we are to have a world left to live in. The truth must be known. The insane prohibitions against the most valuable plant on earth, cannabis hemp, must yield to public demand, and hopefully very soon. The promise of super health and the possibility of feeding the world is at our fingertips. The applications for the wonder plant hemp are continually being discovered and rediscovered. Food, housing, fuel, clothing, paper, shoes, etc., to name just a few. Medical applications are well researched. Studies from Harvard and UCLA medical schools are specific and have positive findings using cannabis in medical intervention in many applications. Studies by Dr. Joanna Budwig, MD, nominated for the Nobel Prize every year since 1979, have shown unparalleled results in the use of essential fatty acids in the treatment of terminal cancer patients. What are essential fatty acids? The term essential is the tip-off. Truly, there can be no life anywhere without the essential oils, linoleic and linolenic acids. These essential oils support the immune system and guard against viral and other insults to the immune system. Studies are in progress using the essential oils to support the immune systems with victims of the HIV virus. So far, they have been extremely promising. What is the richest source of the essential oils? Yes, you guessed it, the seeds from the cannabis hemp plant. The seeds contain 25% LNA acid and 51% LA acid. What better proof of the life-giving values of the now illegal seed? Fortunately, when the creator made the hemp plant, there were no politicians and lobbies for multinational corporations around to advise, and no ignorant congressional committees setting an executive session to declare it illegal. What the world needs now is intelligent legalization of cannabis hemp, especially for medical intervention." Unquote. Top researchers at UCLA Medical.
We no longer recognize the laws that prohibit the cultivation of this plant because this plant is the most valuable resource on the planet. And there's no power on earth great enough, and there's no excuse good enough to keep our children from enjoying the benefits that this seed holds. This is for all of you.
All right.
Yay!
We have seeds available if anyone would like 8 seeds to plant. Oops, we having fun yet or what?
Next, I'd like to introduce a friend of mine who's a tireless hemp activist. He's been living on Maui for the last 4 years. I'm very happy and proud to have my friend Paul von Hartmann speak about the hemp and the environment. Paul. Suffice to say, there are so many issues right now that people are feeling somewhat overwhelmed at finding a solution to any of them, let alone all of them. Well, I believe that the qualities of the hemp plant for fuel, paper, food, medicine, and 50,000 other different products are capable of saving this planet if we act in time. Okay? Now, time is the limiting factor that will determine our survival on this earth and the survival of all other life on earth. We don't have as much time as we're being told because there are several time lags that people aren't thinking about when they're gauging whether or not we're going to make it. If we start to grow commercial grade hemp for fuel in Hawaii, as you can see, I'm standing here holding a stack of books, most of them produced by the University of Hawaii at Manoa Integrated Biofuels Research Program. These fuels that are talked about in these studies have been researched since the early 70s and were considered promising, in fact, economically viable at that time.
Et sur la Loire entre la grève, où l'on posse en beau flot d'argent, on y voit deux bateaux de rêve, la Ligéria de la Manjonnaise.
I feel like it should be.
The cannabis plant has never been and can never be objectively judged as truly illegal. It is simply too useful an agricultural resource.
We use the seeds for our tractor, which we run with hemp oil. It makes us quite independent on the oil lobby.
As conditions of environment, economics, and global military conflict deteriorate, it becomes more important than ever for people to understand relationships between cannabis agriculture, energy production, food security, and developing sustainable economics as a means of achieving world peace.
We are not depending on nobody.
The cannabis plant is part of a complex natural order which has evolved over millions of years. Mankind is far beyond its rightful authority in legislating scarcity of a unique and essential food resource, upon which other species also depend for their survival.
Instead of using any pesticides, even organic ones, you can put these baskets together using simple welded wire in the windows. Because of prohibition, the medicine that I prefer to use, which is cannabis, is so expensive that on disability, nobody can afford it. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it so that you'll go to the doctor and you'll go on Medi-Cal and you'll take their pills and stay in front of a TV and be happy and give them no problems, as opposed to get out there and get in their face and tell them that cannabis is what you prefer to use, and under the Constitution, I should be able to use it because it's what allows me to have a full life. The pills that they want me to use and the pharmaceutical companies that they're behooving to because of contributions to their political life is not functional. Uh, like Demerol, Oxycontin. People are dying behind this stuff. Yeah, it kills the pain, but you can't function. You can't even tell if you took a pill an hour ago, so you took another one and you die. Is that a better medicine? Not for me. There's not one shoe fits everybody. Okay? I know what works for me. Every patient that I have found, every person in a wheelchair that I have known benefits from cannabis. I'm not saying there aren't some out there that it doesn't benefit. I'm just saying that everybody that I've met to date has found a benefit from cannabis as opposed to the heavy narcotics that they would normally use. They're able to taper off their narcotic use and experience a fuller life because of the cannabis. And so I recommend that people try it uh, and judge for themselves. Well, for me, I don't believe in organized religion. I talk to the Lord myself when I need things.
Mhm.
And so that for me, it brings me closer to God or Jesus, which was how I was raised. I don't think that the name really matters, whether you believe in, Allah, or whether you believe in Jesus Christ, or you believe in, the Hindu goddess, or uh, you're a druid. It enables you to release the emotional problems of your mind and brings you closer to your spirituality, whatever that may be. Because we're polluting the oceans to such an extent that the omega-3s that you get in fish are accompanied by so much mercury that you can't ingest enough fish. You're in this balance where you don't have that with the hemp seed. We need those omega-3s, and we don't need the mercury. And we've polluted the planet to such an extent that fish is just loaded with mercury. Pregnant women aren't even supposed to eat it anymore. So where are they going to get their omega-3s? What? It's going to reduce our carbon footprint, because when anything is raised, okay, you burn this tree up here, the carbon goes into the atmosphere. Okay, you make plywood out of it, it's going to tie up that carbon for 100 years. It is known that you can make superior plywood and building materials all from hemp, from insulation to plywood to the resin that holds the plywood together. It's all there in the plant and will last 100 years, and it reduces our carbon imprint. You grow a field of it, you harvest it, the seed and the oils go for food production, and the fiber goes to insulation, building materials, plywood. Because that product lasts so much longer before it's burned or thrown away or left to rot, it's going to tie up that carbon for just that much longer, and we need to keep the carbon tied up. We don't need to burn it. They're burning rice straw because they can't even give it away down here in the valley. If you made bales out of hemp straw and did the straw bale construction, those buildings would last for hundreds of years, and that carbon would be tied up. And you'd have an R value of 1,000. The heat's not going to penetrate that wall because it's 2 foot thick. And it's naturally resistant to insects. It all up. And I'm a cannabis farmer because it benefits my life and brings me closer to my Lord. 420 is also my birthday. I was born April 20th, 1954.
Cannabis is, in fact, a unique drug. Pharmacologically, it's, besides alcohol, the only product that is soluble in alcohols and fats, but not water. And it goes through a totally different chain within the body, being picked up by the fatty portions of the blood, the phospholipids, and transferred to the nervous system as well as other tissues that have sensitivity to these materials. The chemical structure of tetrahydrocannabinol and other cannabinoids resembles precursors to the prostaglandins, a system that expresses the activity of the immune system throughout the body. This unique level of action that goes both simultaneously to the central nervous system above the hypothalamus, down the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, as well as to these peripheral sites, have cannabis as a unique medication, because all the others are water soluble and have a much higher toxicity ratio as compared with the cannabinoids, which are so non-toxic that it's hard to measure. But cannabis, on the other hand, does not have these kinds of adverse effects at all. One of the things in managing chronic conditions is the absence of side effects as being the critical factor. And cannabis has a remarkable profile compared with any of the others, the opiates and the benzos and other non-specific sedatives. In fact, it really enhances both quality of life and rehabilitation, since cannabis both modulates and activates certain kinds of very positive healing functions in the body. Number one, the normalization of gastrointestinal functioning, the promotion of peristalsis. Instead of slowing it up as the opiates do, or paralyzing it in some ways, that cannabis facilitates it, facilitates evacuation as well as the regularization of functioning of the small intestines and the stomach. No other medication can make that claim. The other thing is the increased mobility and motility of people, of the chronically ill. With both the opiates and the benzos, the sedatives, it really discourages mobility and actually enables and facilitates disability by causing depression and slowing down of both motor function and gastrointestinal function, as compared with cannabis, which lifts spirits, if anything, and will improve mobility and motility.
So the father was a single parent with his child, and he just really loved this child. And he decided to look at cannabis. And, you know, federal patent says it's useful for epilepsy. It's, you know, it's in all the literature. And so he said, well, we'll see what this does. He went to a 2-to-1, twice as much CBD as THC with no benefit. Experimented, went to a 3-to-1, had a little tiny bit of benefit. Finally found a 12-to-1. I was able to reduce, so 12 times as much CBD as THC in the strain. Was able to reduce the seizures to 1 seizure every 3 to 4 days. During that period previously, he would have had 1,200 to 1,600 seizures during that 4-day period. And interestingly, I presented that paper to Icarus, which is meeting in a week and a half from now, and I was denied the right to put this poster up on the poster board because it was anecdotal. I said, well, you should meet this father because he'll explain what anecdotal is. But anecdotal evidence based on observation is the basis of all science, the basis of all epigenetic knowledge inheritance. You make an observation, and then you test that observation. And if the observation that I made was, here's a child who was on a toxic substance that had been approved by the Food and Drug Administration after all of these trials and clinical trials and peer-reviewed journals and all of this excellent scientific, statistically valid research, but it failed. That's the observation. That's the observation that these 2 experimental anti-epileptics failed. The Topamax failed, the Dilantin failed, that all of it failed horribly, miserably. And here's a child who takes a non-toxic substance that probably the biggest problem is you can grow it in your backyard and suddenly is feeling better. And I really believe that if we had cannabis in our diet, you probably would contain these symptoms before they became a problem, because some of them appear to stem from a febrile situation where you suddenly go into a seizure mode. Dravet actually is a genetic disorder of the sodium channel, so that the nervous tissue is very irritable to lead to that type of seizure activity, which reinforced previous knowledge that I had that the cannabinoids not only act at the cannabinoid receptors, but they act at channels such as the sodium channel, calcium channel, potassium channel. The cannabinoids also act at enzymes. And it's hard really to quite imagine the scope of the interface between these regulatory molecules and cell physiology, which is part of why I felt that cannabis really was a dietary essential. And so from my perspective, there are two types of uses of cannabinoids. The raw plant, after 34 million years of evolution, provided us with acids, THC acid, CBD acid, cannabinochromic acid, cannabinogerolic acid. That all of these cannabinoids are present in this form. And interesting, one paper that came out about 2 or 3 months ago showed that CBD acid will generate twice the serum level as its decarboxylated form CBD. And it's because CBD really is a synthetic molecule made by humans when you decarboxylate, when you break that carboxyl acid group off of the acid. And so for 10,000 years, we have been heating this plant. And the reason that we heat it is to make it psychoactive, because if you don't heat it, it's not psychoactive. But the biggest problem with the THC is not so much the psychoactivity, but the potency. It's so potent at 10 milligrams that you don't want to, you don't want to do 20 milligrams, and you certainly, if you've done 30 or 40 once, you'll never do that twice. So how do we put these two together? You use the plant the way it evolved over 34 million years. You browse on the raw plant, not psychoactive. Your dose can go up to what it needs to provide control. And if you look at the animals around us, they don't sit there and munch limb after limb. They'll take a bite at sunrise, bite midday, bite in the evening. A very small amount of it goes a long way as a modulator, and you want that frequent dose because of the rapid clearance if you want optimal benefit. And a deer is smart enough to know what makes them feel good. So, anyways, children need cannabis more than we do. They need it daily. So they need it with salads and spinach. It's non-psychoactive. It's an antioxidant. It's patented by the federal government as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant. If you just deal with heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and Alzheimer's, you exceed the military budget. Wilson's life kind of depends on cannabinoids. Our children probably only exist because of cannabinoids. And she's been doing a lot of research on cannabinoids in pregnancy and lactation. And this is an area where
most of my research revolves around cannabis and breastfeeding and pregnancy. It was a very important subject to me because I control my lupus and a whole bunch of other conditions with raw cannabis juice, primarily. And I had unexpected high-risk pregnancy. I'd been told that I was sterile by 3 different doctors and failed in vitro, but a few months after juicing cannabis, I was pregnant with my daughter, Zahaya. And I was able to control my lupus the entire time in pregnancy using the non-psychoactive leaf. And I was very concerned whether cannabis actually had any kind of harm that it could cause the baby naturally. And so I did quite a lot of research on the subject. And there's almost every modern obstetric textbook says that cannabis has unknown effects and therefore should be avoided, and that not enough studies have been done. It's hard for me to see how they can justify using other drugs and in its place. I've been prescribed 43 different medications while breastfeeding and pregnant, including some Class C drugs where they say that they are potentially harmful, but better to help the mother and worry about the baby later. But it took an uphill battle to get my physicians to really understand cannabis, which they luckily do now. But it's so strange to me to have mothers say, well, I've been prescribed Darvocet or OxyContin to use every day, but my doctor says if I'm test positive for cannabis, I could have my child taken away. So hopefully the scientific evidence will change that and women won't have to continue to make a choice between suffering and the health of their baby. So William and I are both expert witnesses on a case in California. In Butte County, they're taking children away from parents that use cannabis, and the rate at which they're taking children away is 70% higher than the national average. And so there's a kind of a groundbreaking case right now where they're trying to say because she used cannabis, she endangered her children. And they want to take them away from good. I know of 3 mothers, including myself, that were supposed to be infertile and juiced and got pregnant quickly after. So I'm really interested in seeing whether getting the cannabinoid levels up, which you can do much higher levels with the non-psychoactive. You can juice the bud too, and if it's fresh, it'll be non-psychoactive. And I think that's the preferred way to use it because then you don't have to worry about any psychoactive effect on the fetus at all, and you are able to get much higher medicinal doses. So I think juicing is definitely the way to go. It's just not always available to everyone. I try to juice 50 leaves or a half an ounce to an ounce of bud per day. Yeah.
Make it throughout the day.
Yeah, in divided doses, like 5 times a day. I don't always have as much as I need, but I try to get as much as possible. And that's what I'd recommend for sustaining a serious medical issue. When you're using the oils and you're using the smoked, you're going to be masking symptoms or controlling them, which is nice if you have like nausea or anxiety, stress, which is one of the worst things in pregnancy. Those would be best to use. But if you have a serious medical condition, you're not going to be able to get your cannabinoid levels up high enough to facilitate strong healing unless you can juice.
Choose your boots carefully. There are rattlesnakes.
Certainly without cannabis, I wouldn't be able to do this work. Physically, it wouldn't be possible. And also, motivationally, to do what I can to help heal the planet and to bring balance to our atmosphere, our environment.
Ancient strains like this have adapted to thousands of years of weather variations, different soil and climate conditions, and different types of insect pests to evolve into a plant that is available as long as these genetics remain available and are renewed and propagated and allowed to adjust increasing UV exposure and possibly to mitigate increasing UVB radiation by reflecting solar radiation back into space and seeding cloud formation.
The economics of punishment, the economics of chemicals are working against us, and they've been institutionalized. So we have an economic inertia to overcome. But I like to think that the power of the truth is greater than any of us can possibly comprehend. And if we employ the truth and we do it in the ways that we have available to us now, for the first time in mankind's history, we have the ability to communicate electronically, globally, instantaneously. The global brain is waking up. And if we can spread these ideas quickly enough, we can overgrow the government. And that's what's happening. That's why the European Union is currently subsidizing hemp cultivation. But the fact is, the Constitution is the law of the land, and you're the one who determines what your spiritual path looks like, not the government. So if you're strong in that and you're willing to stand up for it, then you have a chance. If you don't, then you'll lose whatever protections you might have had. Every spring that passes is gone forever. We don't know how many spring planting seasons we have left before anything we do won't be good enough. And so I feel we're morally obligated, because we're empowered to affect change. I think we're morally obligated to do so.
My name is Kip Baldwin, as Nate said. I'm a passionate love and cannabis advocate and activist. I'm also the co-creator of the show Weed Country, which you guys might have seen on Discovery a couple times. I'm a filmmaker and television producer. And along the way, I've had some interesting experiences. When I first got involved with this, I was first putting Weed Country together. My attitude was, we still making a big deal about this little plant. And just thinking, hey, if some people are getting relief and it's legal for people to get high, I was cool with that. Then after doing 6 hours of interviews with senior citizens and really looking into the history of the plant, I went, wow, Jack Harrow was 100% right. This plant has the ability to save the world. Along the way, I encountered some things that were troubling to me. A lot of greed I started to see. People saying, hey, you have to have seed tests to show where you can grow this plant. That's bullshit. It will adapt in a couple years. It was all started to feel about greed. Then I met the man I'm about to introduce at a cannabis hemp festival up in Sacramento with John Trudell and Chris Christopherson. And this man speaks the truth. He was the first one out of all the people at this event who said, hey, 95% of our marijuana eradication budget's going to wiping out the wild hemp growing in North Dakota. We got to save that seed stock. We're running out of time. This plan has the ability to change the planet, change the economy to a living, local, sustainable one for everyone where we can all prosper, not coming from a place of greed. This is a really beautiful human being who's been doing this, fighting this fight for 25 years, put himself out there. Before he was doing this, he was the director of Sea Shepherd in Hawaii. And I want to introduce my very, very good friend and brother in this fight, Paul von Hartmann.
Yeah, I started doing this work, the cannabis work, about a quarter of a century ago. I was in Hawaii. I was working on 6 different environmental issues all at the same time with Sea Shepherd. And I learned about cannabis and what it can do for the environment. And I realized that it was the fundamental challenge of our time to shift our valuation of the herb from illegal to essential. And that's really what we're challenged with today, even still, a quarter of a century later. It's amazing to me that we're still saying the same things over and over again. And so what I did recently was I published a book, and the book is called Cannabis versus Climate Change. And the book is intended to be the final argument to end cannabis prohibition. Because if we don't fix climate change, if we don't do something about the national security and the global integrity, then everything that we cherish may be at stake. And we need to be aware of that and to do everything we can to make a difference. And in the book I wrote, I introduce a federal protocol that is mentioned in 4 emergency preparedness documents. And the protocol is referred to as essential civilian demand. National security issues require that we grow cannabis as fast as we can in every soil and climate condition that it may be able to adapt. Because what's happening is that the UVB radiation that comes from the sun is becoming more intense at the surface of the planet. There are several reasons for that. It was in 2006, climate scientists working in Sweden announced that the fragrant aerosols that come off of the evergreen trees go up into the stratosphere and reflect solar radiation away from the earth. Well, by the time they'd figured this out, we'd already killed half of the trees and just about half of the marine phytoplankton that also produce the same aerosols that are called monoterpenes. Well, we've eliminated half of the organisms that produce these atmospheric aerosols, the monoterpenes. And the only crop on Earth that's capable of replenishing the atmosphere with monoterpenes in the time that we may have left to make a difference is cannabis. And it's the argument to end all arguments, because it's not contestable that the UV is increasing. Those figures are not ambiguous at all. And the fact that cannabis produces 58 monoterpenes is an amazing thing to say. Cannabis grows in abundance. It is our functional interface with the natural order because it offers us a biogenic alternative to the toxins that we currently base our economic system in. We were born into a lie that became fraud. And now, because national security and global integrity are at stake, it is a lie that turned into treason, because we are obligated to bring the strategic resource that's been identified in 7 presidential executive orders as essential to our national security. It's our challenge, it's our obligation to bring it back. And climate change is the best reason to do that. Increasing UVB radiation causes immune suppression, it causes genetic mutation, abnormal cell growth, which become cancerous, and it also increases the solubility of mercury, arsenic, and selenium compounds out of aqueous solutions. So with the increased UVB radiation, the hydrologic cycle potentially could become more toxic. It's such an unknown equation. There's so many things that are changing so fast, it's hard to keep track of where the baseline is. And so when you have variables like UVB radiation that are changing so dramatically over such short periods of time, it's really impossible to anticipate all of the different things that happen as a result of that. One of the theories that I introduce in my book is that what happens when the terpenes come off of the plants is they go up into the stratosphere and they reflect solar radiation away from the planet. And so they shield the earth from the sun in that way. But they also serve as cloud condensation nuclei for formation of bright and persistent clouds. And the clouds also shield the earth from the sun. Well, what's really interesting is that the monoterpenes don't photodegrade in sunlight. What happens is they're rained from the sky. And what is known about monoterpenes is that they have antifungal, antiviral, antibiotic, and antioxidizing effects. And so it just stands to reason that if you have half of the concentration of monoterpenes in the rain, then there's a possibility that the enhanced rain is diluted because the concentrations of monoterpenes aren't there to help purify the hydrologic cycle. It's another dimension of cannabis as medicine for Mother Earth that is analogous to cannabis in our own bodies. It's a situation where what's true for the small is true for all. And each of us individually has a relationship with cannabis, whatever that may be. The separation between medical marijuana and spiritual use and recreational use, those are all very convenient for politicians to try to wrap their heads around the contemporary cannabis culture. But for those of us who are directly involved with the plant and who are directly involved in the culture, we understand that those are meaningless designations and distinctions. What is important is to make the distinction between drugs and herbs, because drugs don't make seeds, herbs make seeds. And on the first page of the Bible, God repeated himself twice using the word herb. I've given you every herb-bearing seed. I've given you every green herb. And that legal distinction has never been made. The truth is, our freedom to farm every herb-bearing seed is the first test of religious freedom. And we've never needed permission to feed ourselves, to provide the best medicines, to create an economic system based in abundance, rather than scarcity. We've never needed permission. We just needed to recognize that the cannabis culture is the world's oldest global culture. We're a legitimate spiritual entity, each one of us individually. And that's why I founded the California Cannabis Ministry when my son was born 8 years ago, and formalized my secular individual spiritual development as a human being through the cannabis plant, and experienced interspecies communication and become a bit wilder for having aligned myself with the consciousness that's been offered to me.
Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later. And y'all have a blessed night.
Al mundo despertó el que